If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 280 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for what's sure to be an out-of-this-world episode. After this episode, you will believe a podcast can fly. My guest today is Detroit radio and TV legend Jay Towers, but also Jay is co-host of the Caped Wonder Superman podcast. So he is here to talk all things Christopher Reeve, Superman. We got some great stories coming up in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, what will seem like a flash, Brenton Spencer was here last week talking all about CW's The Flash and a lot more great stories. Do not miss that amazing episode. But right now, we've got a super episode in front of you, a Superman episode. I met Jay Towers at the Motor City Comic-Con at the Christopher Reeve Legacy Reunion. So he's here and we are talking OG Superman. And that's coming up right now. All right, I'm excited to introduce you to my next guest, Fox 2 Detroit legend and Superman maniac, co-host of the Cape Wonder Superman podcast. Welcome to the show, Jay Towers.
Jeff, what's up? How are you?
Jay, I'm great. I'm excited that you agreed to be on my show, given I kind of stalked you at the Motor City Comic-Con convention. It's been a while now, but I'll say we met.
Yes. I'm excited. Hey, listen, you know what? Between radio and TV, I always feel like I'm doing the interviewing. So anytime I get to get in, it's nice to be interviewed.
Well, I'm happy then to give you that break. Jay, we met at the Christopher Reeve Legacy Reunion at the Motor City Comic-Con, and I want to work up to that in a second. But where did your obsession with Superman kind of start?
My parents took me to see Superman the movie just before my 4th birthday. So it would have been, like winter 1979. It came out in December 78. So probably my parents saw it on New Year's Eve, I think. And when they said, okay, this is, there's nothing in there you can't see, because I'd seen the commercials. So I saw it when I was almost 4. So it is my earliest childhood memory and my favorite. So that's how I always described the first Christopher Reeve Superman film. And after that, I was just, every shirt, every action, anything I could get my hands on, it's all I ever wanted was that version of Superman.
And you were in Batman v Superman?
I was, yeah. God, there's a cool story about that because Zack Snyder was in town and he was scouting locations in Detroit for the film. And he happened to be watching Fox 2 on some random weekend morning when he was in town, long before I think they even announced it was going to be in Detroit. And I happened to be doing a story that day and showed my Superman office on TV. And he went to the casting director and said, that guy's a fan, put him in the movie. So I didn't have to audition or anything like that. And when I met him, the first thing he said to you was, hey, when you were a kid, did you ever get picked on for being the Superman fan? And I said, yeah, of course. I don't know, it was such a Star Wars time and all. And he said, well, it just paid off today. How great is that?
That is amazing. And let me share also that you share a credit with my daughter, my youngest daughter, who was also in Batman v Superman.
What did she do?
She was in, the Day of the Dead scene where the makeup, she was one of the kids in the makeup. And,
nice.
And so my wife went down with her. They were calling it like Lilo and something. It was some weird fake name. And they get down there and it's Batman v Superman, and they kind of, put her in that makeup. My wife's version of the story is she's sitting there because Henry Cavill was there, leaning against like his SUV or whatever with an iPhone in full Superman. Yeah. She still talks about seeing him in the Superman garb, but she also got to see the Batmobile. She may have said I doubt she touched it, but she saw it. Anyway, so my daughter was in that scene, and what was cool about it was when the preview came out, she was right there. So we got
that was in the trailer. Yeah.
So I got a Geek Cred screenshot. of my daughter in that. So that was fun.
We were lucky to have movies being filmed here. I know they got rid of that film incentive, but boy, for a little while, it seemed like we were going to be Midwest Hollywood.
I know, we were almost the Avengers, and I think Cleveland ended up with it or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cleveland? So, it's funny, because I knew we were going to talk, I rewatched Superman and Superman 2. Because why not? Anytime you need an excuse. My memory going into it was that in my head, Superman 2 was the greatest movie ever. Second only to, or right there with Spider-Man 2. I thought, from a superhero point of view, I thought those are the greatest superhero movies ever. Not that I love Superman, but I probably hadn't seen it in forever. Anytime I rewatched, because, the extra Kryptonian villains, it was always probably a Superman 2 viewing. But I rewatched Superman. And I got to say, it changed my perspective. I realized Superman is the far superior movie. It's a great movie. And I forgot how amazing it really was. And when you sit there and you watch Christopher Reeve, you're like, I get why people go, he's my Superman. He's Superman. It was kind of really cool to kind of re-experience it.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, when I saw Superman 2 in the movie theaters, it was, I know I saw the first Superman in the theater as a very little kid, but, after that, I mean, I had seen it so many times. And when Superman 2 finally came in theaters, I don't remember if I was like 7 or 8, but it was, I thought, again, I mean, that was the action-packed, oh my God. And it's a lot of, like, we talk about Wrath of Khan, being the better Star Trek movie. Because the first one was kind of slow. But I mean, Superman obviously was superior as a film, but I loved Superman too. I mean, that was, again, action packed and losing powers. And, as a kid, we didn't know what was going on between Lester and Donner and all those things. That was just the Superman 2 we knew.
Exactly. But it was interesting when I rewatched Superman, the movie, and then I rewatched Superman 2, and I just started kind of, Googling stuff. It's almost the drama behind both of those movies. It's amazing how much trivia and drama go behind each of those movies. It's just crazy that we ended up with such amazing, iconic classics in the end.
Yeah, for people that don't know, and I think everybody knows the story by now, but you never know. I mean, you had Richard Donner was filming Superman and Superman 2 at the same time. They wanted to get the first one out. They were way over budget and they released it. And then shortly after, you have like the #1 movie in the world, they fire Richard Donner and bring in Richard Lester to do 2. And a lot of Superman 2 that we saw in the theaters was Donner's footage, but Lester shot quite a bit of stuff as well. He had to. And then all these years later, we get the Richard Donner cut, which is a great try at trying to reassemble the film he envisioned. I'll always watch Superman 2 as the one I remember as a kid. And I always think of the Donner cut as a bonus extra, more footage, more of the original vision. I never look at that as the Superman 2. I see how it could have been, but you remember what you connect with as a kid, and the nostalgia of the original Superman 2 will always be, will always be there.
Yeah, I love Superman 2. We were in Niagara Falls, and I look around and I go, oh my God, this is where Superman 2 was. It didn't click until I was right there, right? And so I get on YouTube, God bless YouTube, and I get on YouTube and I find the scene, and I find pretty much, okay, it had to have been about there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, awesome. It was really, really cool. The funny thing, maybe I can blame Superman 2 for this, but like the Maid of the Mist is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Maid of the Mist, correct me if I'm wrong, is the American side.
God, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
So, but that takes place on the Canadian side, the movie, right?
Right. Although that was never really specified in the film.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny.
But like the Canadian side is where, when you think Niagara Falls, the American side of Niagara Falls is more like I think a park or something like that. So they show Maid of the Mist. So my whole life, Maid of the Mist, right? So funny story, and I blame Superman 2 for this. We go to Niagara Falls, us and another couple, and we're having fun. And of course, we're going to go into the falls, and we get Maid of the Mist. But we're on the Canadian side. Maid of the Mist is the American side. We had to literally walk. And let me be clear, the Canadian version of the Maid of the Mist is literally no different than the American side. I think you wear blue versus red ponchos or something. It's just a different color. We had to walk across the border go to it because that's where we had our tickets. And I was like,
Yeah.
and so I was like, I think that's why Maid of the Mist is stuck in my head because there's no other reason. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know the brand name of the ferry in Niagara Falls otherwise. But anyway, it was just funny. So it was like we ended up walking 40 minutes to get to it when we were 5 minutes from the Canadian side one. Anyway, just when I watched the movie.
And non-exchangeable tickets, right?
Yeah, and when I was watching the movie, I was like, this is why it was in my head. Because I've watched this movie 1,000 times and it was like, Maid of the Mist, of course. So anyway, so that was that.
Listen, that's a great spot to go visit too. I mean, we did that a couple of years ago before the 2019 Motor City Comic Con. Jim Bowers and I, who I do the Cape Wonder podcast with, went there. We did all the filming locations. We met Hadley K out there, who's the little boy that fell into the falls, and kind of got his recount of what happened and how they filmed it. And yeah, it's cool. It's still, listen, it's funny. So many people visit that and maybe haven't seen Superman 2, but if you're a Superman fan and you go there, you immediately know the spots and where to go.
Yeah, it was it was really cool. How did you get involved with Jim Bowers and kind of, in iHeartRadio and putting together the Caped Wonder podcast and kind of synthesizing this passion of Superman?
As a Superman fan, I would go to the Cape Wonder website long before I ever knew Jim, and just used to marvel over these photos that, Jim has the largest collection of behind the scene rare Superman filming photos over anybody. He got them from Pinewood Studios. I think this all kinds didn't pay off their storage locker bill. And he made a deal with somebody and got all of these rare behind the scenes photos that, Warner Brothers to this day still comes to him for and says, hey, we'd like this picture because you have it and we don't. I got to know him a little bit. And then he was putting together he wanted to do a Richard Donner reunion of the Superman films. I think that was in 2016. And I reached out to him and said, hey, can I help? I work on TV in Detroit and I might be able to provide television coverage, which could maybe make it a little bigger. And that's how I got to know him. And that WonderCon in Anaheim reunion was, I think, the last time we had Margot Kidder and Valerie Perrine together. Most of the Superman cast was there. A message from Richard Donner on the screen. And probably one of the only times, and we've done a lot of these panels over the years with the cast. I mean, when you're in California and the panel room had to have had over 1,000 people in it. It was really this really cool electric vibe that you can still see on YouTube. So that's how I got to know him. We became friends. And I think for the 40th anniversary of Superman, we said, hey, let's do a podcast because I work for iHeartRadio and we're the number one podcasting company in America. And we should do a podcast. And that's how it started. So I think we did 50 episodes or close to it. It is not easy to do a podcast about, 4 Christopher Reeve films and try to pick them apart and get guests and bring something fresh to them. But we have, and it's fun. We don't do as many as we once did because we just don't want to be two guys reminiscing 40 minutes on a podcast. Like we want to try to do a show that brings you something you didn't know. So whether it's somebody that worked on the crew or a cast member who we've talked to just about all of them, we try to do that. And sometimes we meet people, we've had guests before that just pop up on Facebook. The Derbyshires were at Niagara Falls. You'll know their kids as soon as you see them. But they were there that day filming. And because the husband was part of his dad worked for Parks and Recs and they got into this little scene in the movie and they had all these wild behind the scenes photos that they weren't allowed to take. Their cameras weren't supposed to have film in it. And this guy just took a ton of pictures. So you see Christopher Reeve on wires, you see all this behind the scenes stuff. So that was a great interview. So we always find people like that to interview.
That's awesome. I can see where, you create something and it's okay that something can have a beginning and an end,
Sure.
Well, one of the things where we met at the Christopher Reeve Legacy reunion at the Motor City Comic Con, that's a great way to extend it. And honestly, I think that's where I found out about the podcast and started kind of diving into it. I was like, oh, this is really cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about, just that really cool charity event and
Sure,
pulling all these classic people together?
The Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, which does all this great research and awareness for anybody that has had a spinal cord injury, they over the years started moving away from the Superman part of it. Not because the organization didn't want to, but it's really a licensing thing. You put a Superman S on anything and there's a royalty or there's some kind of licensing. So as the audience listen, there are kids that are in college that play football and are paralyzed and, can't walk. And their hero may not be Christopher Reeve and Superman. I mean, they're 18 years old. It could be someone else. So as that nonprofit has evolved, I had approached them and said, we want to do a Superman reunion, but we want to do it kind of as a thank you to Christopher Reeve. And we want to donate a portion of whatever we can get. And I'd done interviews with them before and they were very nice. And they're like, you know what, for this, yes, we'll do it. We'll partner with you. We'll partner with a Superman event. And then DC came in and did the Superman 78 comic, the variant cover for Motor City, which is, Christopher Reeve holding up the cab in front of the Fox Theater, which is unbelievable. All the extra pages inside, they allowed us to be Caped Wonder podcast pages. So any guests that we had, their quotes and things that they've said on the podcast and the Dave Santia illustration, that comic book is really, really special. So to have that and to help out the Reeve Foundation, just about everybody we could get was on board, came to town and did it. So it was really, it was a great event. The panel was great. And people loved seeing all of those stars in one spot, remembering Christopher Reeve.
It was great. And I got a press pass thanks to this podcast.
Nice.
But yeah, it was cool. I mean, Sarah Douglas was there, Jack O'Halloran, Aaron Smolinski, Mark McClure, Mark Pillow, Nuclear Man from Superman 4, and Mariel Hemingway from Superman 4, and then Bobby Vendetti and Wilfred Torres.
Wilfredo Torres is the artist for that Superman 78. Yeah.
Sorry, got that wrong.
It's okay.
Can't read my writing. But that was awesome. For me is like this, just kind of Superman geek, comic geek in general, to be able to spend like 5 minutes with each of these folks. Yeah. And like, I even brought like a camera crew with me. Camera crew, one guy with a camera, but
still,
it was really cool. It gave me a reason to watch Superman 4 again. And didn't realize until rewatching that Gene Hackman's voice was Nuclear Man.
That's right. Yeah. And Mark Pillow's great. Listen, I have made a great friendship with Mark Pillow, and I represent Mark now for any Comic-Con appearance he does. I get him booked for those, and I go out there and, sit there with him, and I watch fans come up to him. And again, a lot like we were talking about Superman 2 and how you thought that was, like the best superhero film ever. If you were 8 years old or 10 years old when Superman 4 came out, again, as a 10-year-old in 1987, you weren't going, the effects aren't that great, or this isn't that. It was the Superman you remember. Nuclear Man was the villain you remember, and that's your childhood. So he meets people like that at these shows who don't have that same kind of, Superman 4 was just the worst. I mean, the kids, if that was their Superman when they were 10 or whatever, they're thrilled to meet him and have a whole different view of that film. So it's really nice to see him and Mariel Hemingway. I was just with the two of them last weekend and at Smallville Con in Kansas. And I mean, that was the picture to get, was with, get a photo with those two.
Yeah, Mariel Hemingway was great to talk to. I loved chatting with her. And I will say, was not a fan of Superman 4, but in rewatching it, I'm like, I was harsh. Sorry to interrupt, but we have to take a quick break. However, the Christopher Reeve Legacy event I was talking about, you can hear all those interviews in episode 137 of Classic Conversations. I talked to Mariel Hemingway, Sarah Douglas, Mark McClure, Jeff East is in that one as well. Mark Pillow is not, unfortunately, because the actual audio when I recorded it didn't work. He was the first one. Anyway, long story. Check that out. Also, thank you for supporting our sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. Before I send you back to the podcast, let me know what you thought about Superman 1, 2, 3, or 4. Tweet at us, comment to us on Instagram, Facebook. All right, and we're back. We're going to talk about Superman 3 and its big impact on pop culture. And we're back. I wasn't a fan of Superman 3 either back in the day.
Right.
And though Superman 3 did allow for one of the greatest plot points in a different movie, Office Space.
Sure, that's right. It was a half a cent, right?
Yeah, I remember watching Office Space. I'm in my bedroom. It's on TV. It's loud. And the guy goes, so we'll take the half fractions of the pennies and we'll round them off and we'll store them. And I go, oh my God, that's the plot
of Superman 3. Yeah.
And then they say that in the movie. And then the guy goes, isn't that the plot of Superman 3? And my wife pokes her head out. She goes, I don't remember what something like, you are such a loser. Did this really just happen?
That's funny.
I'm like, she supports me, but
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But But yeah, that came from that. So of course, I was in college at the time too. And I think Superman 1, Superman 2 were at that point so impressionable and strong. And I love them so much. So 4 didn't resonate. But in rewatching it, it was worth the rewatch. It really was.
We always describe that film too as it was the last time Christopher Reeve wore the Superman costume. So that in itself, that movie meant something to him. And if you're a fan of him, again, he knew the budget got slashed and he knew it was not going to be what it was. But the guy was a professional and still portrayed those. I don't think anybody would say, well, Clark Kent and Superman and 4, the portrayal was not so great. I think he was probably his best portrayal. He had the character down pat. It's just, it lacked in other places.
Right. It was just, and I think my original memories of it were, I don't know. Anyway, but it was a nice rewatch, and Marilyn Hemingway was delightful. Mark Pillow was delightful in it. I've yet to rewatch Superman 3. Perhaps I'll get up the nerve one of these days.
Well, again, hey, listen, Superman 3, evil Superman fighting Superman, or Clark Kent in that junkyard scene. I mean, that's a beloved scene. I mean, again, say what you want about Superman 3, but you have some really great scenes, and the effects were all, again, same crew as the first 2 films. So at least you have really good flying effects in that film and some new things. So yeah, it's fun to look at it a different way. It's a little hokey with, with Richard Pryor and all, but it has its place in history now.
It does. It's interesting, like, as I was kind of diving into Superman, the movie, and just kind of reacquainting myself with it, is, nowadays we take it for granted that every movie has this Oscar winner, this big star, this, that, right? And, not always the case. And Superman, the movie, really was first time that here we have all of a sudden, like, giants in this movie.
Yeah.
The first time that, like, giants were in the, like, oh, hey, by the way, we're making Superman, and we got Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman. Oh, and the guy that wrote The Godfather. Yeah, he wrote it.
Yeah, right.
And so in reading, though, I don't know if this is true or not, but I read it on the internet. Mario Puzo, who was written by in the original story, is that Donner didn't use the script.
No, as a matter of fact, I was really lucky. Jim and I were both really lucky last year to get something that fans had been looking for forever, and that was Puzo's original script, first and second draft, which I think we finally launched on Cape Wonder. But it is wild to read that. It is a much different. There are elements of Superman and even a couple elements of Superman 2 that but it's a very different movie. Puzo wanted to do a very different type of Superman. We got audio tapes of some of the meetings with Puzo, not arguing with the Salkinds, but between the Salkinds in DC and Puzo's like, what is the big deal with Superman, sleeping with Lois Lane? And they had to explain, like, that there's certain things you can't do. And that's where the whole story came of losing the powers, because now he's immortal. And there was talk of having a Kryptonian wedding in the Fortress of Solitude. So they wouldn't be sleeping together and, not be married. I mean, the conversations are fascinating. So you can see how it evolved after those meetings.
That reminds me, it's Superman 2, right? When he loses his powers. I was,
yeah.
Anytime you rewatch something, you're going to watch it from the point of view of where you are in life right now. Yeah. And so he's like, Lois, I love you, right? And they're like, oh, Clark. And then he's like, I want to live with this mortal. And they're like, well, then you can't have your powers. And I was like, okay. And I was thinking of it, but I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't she have been more like, hey, Clark, let's put in the crystal about second, third, and fourth dates. Let's not jump the gun on giving up the powers after one little kiss on the cheek. Let's just.
Oh, yeah. Also, giving up, like, what you're known for and what makes you, like, unbelievable, and just say, yeah, lose it all just to be a regular guy. Yeah, I know it was that part was a little odd, but again, it has its place in history.
Oh, no, I just was watching it from, like, a father's point of view now, where I was just like it made perfect sense. I didn't question it at all when I was watching it the first time. It was just in this rewatch. I was just like, for all the knowledge in the world, it's like, maybe give it a minute, give it a hot second, Clark.
Right.
There might be other girls down the road. It's
sure.
just
it could be right. Play the field a little.
That was it. And then she's like, you did what? You didn't even ask her. It was just like, anyway. So Sorry, it just in rewatching it, I found that quite humorous. So anyway, so the whole idea then that, okay, this is like this huge blockbuster. And I mean, they got names on top of names, right? Jackie Cooper, Glenn Ford. I interviewed Jack O'Halloran. I know you've talked to all these folks. Have you ever talked to Jack O'Halloran in length?
So I talk to Jack O'Halloran twice a week, every week of my life.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
I have never been more fascinated by someone than Jack O'Halloran.
Yeah.
I interviewed him. He was like one of my first interviews, like early on. And we're talking, and his father, right, was like the head of the Gambino mob and all that kind of stuff. And he's telling stories.
Sure,
and
make sure you get all that information right.
Oh yeah, well, whatever, just but he's just talking. I just stopped talking, and he's talking about JFK and the assassination of JFK on my podcast. I'm just like, my jaw's like wide open. I'm like, all right, this is incredible. This is, just
Jack wrote a book about it all called Family Legacy, which he is working on right now to turn into a film, and that will be a fascinating film.
Yeah, I think I have a copy of it. He was just, it was sometimes you interview people and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I thought I was just talking to Nan from Superman.
Right.
It's like, oh my God, this guy is fascinating behind fascinating. And then when I interviewed Jeff East a while ago as well. That whole, it's funny, you watch a movie and you don't realize something and then you rewatch it, because when I was talking with Jeff, he's like, and I was prepping for that. It was like, he had the prosthetics and they overdubbed Christopher Reeve's voice.
Yeah.
I never noticed until I rewatched it. And then I'm like, how did I not notice this? So obvious that that's Christopher Reeve. And it was just, and then they didn't tell him and he was upset about that.
I think he found out at the premiere, right? I think they told him. I think it was the first time he found out was he was watching the movie.
I don't even think he was invited to the premiere. I think that was part of like some of the drama behind it too. They were trying to like distance themselves and like I think if I remember correctly, he was, Christopher Reeve wanted to play Clark Kent also, and so there was a little bit of a disconnect there. But I was like, it was funny because like that interview, I wasn't going to air it because he had done it on an iPhone and like Paris, and it was like there was too much of some of that interview that was just not usable. It would go out and stuff like that. And so when I was part of your Christopher Reeve Legacy reunion at the Motor City Comic Con, and I had all of a sudden all these, 5-minute interviews with Jack O'Halloran again, Sarah Douglas, Mark McClure, all that. Then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to grab the Jeff East part where we talk about Superman, and I bundled it together. It was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was great. Like the headliner interview for that, even though he wasn't there. But it was just all these interesting things about the Superman movies. Like I didn't realize that Brando wasn't in Superman 2 until it was made clear. And then because you see his hand and you just think, oh, that's Brando. Nope, that was a stunt double. They got a guy whose hand looked just like Brando.
Yeah. And all of a sudden now it's all about the mother and her wishes. And again, they just did not want to pay him.
But they would have had to pay him a lot. He made a lot of money for like 5 minutes of work there.
Yeah.
Back then, I mean, to make like, what did he make? Like
$1 million or $2 million or something like it was. I thought it was $1 million. Maybe it was $2 million. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was just like whatever it was then. That would be like bazillion these days. So it was like, and then Superman was like the biggest movie ever at the time, right? And it was just like it crushed. And you get Superman 2. It was interesting to me that was that new at the time? The whole concept of making 2 movies at the same time.
I think the Salkinds did it with the Three Musketeers. I think they did that. Pretty sure that was before Superman. They had done it before though, and they found it to be cost effective when staying in budget. But Donner really wanted this film to be special, and he continued spending more money because he wanted it to look great. And you could tell that. I mean, you can see that movie and get it. You can be like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, he definitely had a vision. And then the Salkinds, like I remember Jack O'Halloran was very upset with the Salkinds and Christopher Reeve for not stepping up, and because he felt that he could have maybe helped them convince him to keep Donner. But that this was like Christopher Reeve's one of his first things, if not his first, right? So he didn't really have like the power or whatever sway to like say, no, you got to keep Donner.
And you had Sarah Douglas, who did most of the press for Superman 2. I mean, they put her on a jet and flew her around to every single country to promote Superman 2 because she wasn't, it's not that she didn't love Donner, but she wasn't going to speak poorly of the Salkinds. She was just doing her job, and they just couldn't trust if Jack would go out there, and they knew he would. They knew he bashed the Salkinds for firing Donner. Donner was really beloved by that cast.
Yeah, anyone that you talk to in that cast, if you mention, they could go on for 20 minutes about how amazing Richard Donner was. And it's like, it's weird to think that they just wouldn't have just kind of gone with it, given that so much, I mean, what, like 70% of Superman 2 was already created when they, finished Superman, right? And so it was interesting to read like that a lot of the bad guy scenes, the Kryptonian scenes and Gene Hackman stuff was filmed and like they wouldn't come back. There's certain people that would not come back.
Salkind is Alexander's passed on. Ilya Salkind has said in interviews more recently that was a regret. I mean, you think about it. You're known for this legacy. I mean, you brought arguably the biggest superhero film of all time, to the big screen. And you're also known as being this, kind of villain among fans for firing the guy that created that first film. Right. So I think, if he could go back in time and do it again, I don't think he would have done what he did. But, at the time he did. And it was shocking.
Right. You never know what thing you might be doing is what's going to be remembered forever.
Yeah.
That's why everyone should always do good. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, Superman 2 has one of the greatest endings ever when he goes back into, he'd gotten beaten up by the guy in the diner. And then he goes back and he just spins him around, throws it, and then I've been working out.
It's the ultimate getting revenge on your bully.
I mean, I think I say that all the time. I mean, and like, it was interesting to read that like they wanted famous people originally, not necessarily Christopher Reeve. Like they tried to get Robert Redford and like Burt Reynolds and like all these people. Everyone turned them down. It was just interesting when you dive into some of the background of this. And then I don't know, is there any like trivia that you have in your back pocket that like you think most people don't talk about enough that is so cool when it comes to Superman 1 or 2?
I'm trying to think trivia. What boy, Jim is a better guy for that. But I'll tell you this: I feel like one of the greatest versions of Superman the movie is the television cut that came out on Blu-ray a couple of years ago. ABC, when these movies came out on television, they were really big events. I mean, if you wanted to buy Superman on VHS, it was like $100 or more to buy that. So people weren't buying films like that. But when it first aired on ABC, they made it a 2-night event and people watched that movie. And if you went to the theater and saw it 5 times and all of a sudden it's on television, it was a much longer version. There were scenes that no one had ever seen before and longer versions of things. And that really excited fans of like, hey, where did this come from? And the same thing with Superman 2. We talked about Superman 2 earlier, but when Superman 2 was on television and I saw that movie and the Concorde scene happened, which is fairly early in the film where, he's off to Paris to go save Lois. And now all of a sudden he's racing the Concorde. That was not in the version I saw in theater 5 times. So I was like, well, what's that? But there was a lot of scenes like that. So fans got what they wanted and got that long 3-hour version of Superman on. And again, for a true fan that really wants to see the whole vision, it's great to see that long 3-hour cut. You just see things you never saw before. And fans want the long Lester cut of Superman 2 as well. That has scenes that weren't in the Donner cut. So extended versions are what excite people. We've heard that there's a version of Superman 4 that's very long, very tough to find, but we know Warner has it. And same thing with Superman 3. I mean, Superman 3, when it was on ABC TV, did not have an opening scene where, they're walking through the streets of Metropolis and all these goofy things are happening. It started with the space and the credits, just like the first and second film. So getting those versions in really good quality would be great.
That would be great. It's always interesting when you see like different versions and different scenes and things that are cut and things that wouldn't necessarily, I know we're not like Superman. We talked about Batman v Superman earlier, and I didn't enjoy that in the theater. And then I saw the extended cut that had more scenes in it, and it made much more sense. The movie was,
without a doubt, totally agree.
So much better version of the movie. And, so I think sometimes when you take or give, you have to, hopefully it actually helps. And then sometimes it's nice, like with the Superman movies, where it was like some bonus scenes. And I always get confused, like when he saves the world by spinning around at the end of Superman 1, and you forget you forget how like how grounded. I mean, Lois dies pretty harsh.
Sure.
In Superman, like not like like it's a horrible death. I mean, it's like, But wasn't that supposed to be the concept of time travel and reversing time supposed to be for Superman 2?
Yeah, the ending of Superman the movie was the ending of Superman 2. I mean, that's how it was supposed to be. He was supposed to throw that rocket into space, and then that was going to release the villains, and then, you'd have it. But turning back the Earth was shot for Superman 2. And that they thought it looked spectacular, and they wanted to, again, put that film out and get going with it. So they made it the end. They tried in the Donner cut to do that again. And you got to see some scenes you didn't see. You got to see Perry White, with a tube of toothpaste that he's putting on in the bathroom, and then it goes back into the tube. So you got to see more of what would happen if you turn the Earth backwards with some of the characters that you know. But yeah, it was a great scene. And again, as a kid, when you saw that, you were like, how cool is this? You fly around the Earth a couple times backwards, and you can reverse time.
Right.
Not exactly Interstellar, but still.
No. But again, rewatching it as a parent, and I'm like, literally, Clark, that's the one thing they told you not to do.
Right. It's forbidden to interfere with human history.
Very clear. I mean, as a baby, they told you one thing. Hey, just don't do this thing. You got all this stuff. Just don't do this one thing.
Right.
Oh, man. All right. So Superman 1, Superman 2, Cape Wonder.
Hey, what do you think? Superman Legacy next year, right? Or 2025 it'll be out. They're going to film it next year. James Gunn.
I love James Gunn. I think James Gunn, everything he touches is great. I love the Guardians movies are like my favorite movies ever.
Mm-hmm.
Suicide Squad, amazing. Or the one he did was amazing. Peacemaker, amazing.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm really excited. I think if I was Marvel, I'd be like, I cannot believe we let James Gunn go run DC when we had him.
I thought, and I was wrong, but I thought that this Flash movie, and even before I saw it, I thought, you know what? This Flash movie is going to be a problem for DC because it's going to do great. And you're going to have Ben Affleck in it, and you're going to have, people wishing Henry was in it, and all these things are going to happen, and they're going to be in a jam because they're going to say, just assembling this universe, and this universe did really good. And I was wrong. I mean, listen, I wouldn't call that movie a failure, but then I read today that it is their biggest failure. It just did not make the money they thought it was going to make. I thought the movie was fine. I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. I mean, from start to finish, that movie was entertaining and had action. And I got Keaton as Batman. Whoever thought we'd ever see that again? I just talked to Kevin Smith last week, did an interview with him, and he said the same thing. I mean, that was his Batman. 1989 Batman was his Batman. So to get that opportunity was worth it. But I mean, that most people were here, and that's the highlight is Michael Keaton.
It's interesting, like that movie. I don't know how you feel about Indiana Jones 5, but like everyone going, this is the great, Steven Spielberg. I loved it. It was so good. I was like, no, it wasn't. Right. No, it wasn't.
Right. I haven't seen it yet.
It's like the other movies without the joy.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good.
Well,
that's good to know.
I'll say I was watching it the whole time going, this could have been great. Like if Spielberg had done it, it just missed out. Like when you watch Raiders, like every scene when they're running through the corridors and all that, and everything's like clever. I guess clever is a good word. There's just a layer of cleverness on everything happening. There's no layer of cleverness. And I think you need a layer of cleverness for it to be Indiana Jones. Like that's what makes it so fun. And it just felt long and it didn't feel fun. It's always nice to see Harrison Ford, but that's how I feel about that.
Well, sometimes but it's really interesting what you say, because sometimes you roll the dice on the nostalgia. Again, well, it's Harrison Ford, it's Indiana Jones. It's what we grew up with. It doesn't matter what he does. Your review has me thinking maybe I'll wait see it on demand.
I would wait to see it on demand. I think it's one of those. I told someone this earlier. I was like, maybe if you see it at home, is it coming off Crystal Skull? You got to put all the chips on the table. You know what I mean? I did not like Crystal Skull, and 1, 2, and 3 loved. 3 is one of my favorites. I mean, and The Last Crusade. With Indiana Jones, it's like you watch it, and I'm like, the pieces are there. The pieces are there. It's just Spielberg needed to do this. No offense to the guy who did it, but but not for this, not for that.
I hear the John Williams music was good though.
Of course. But there's only so much nostalgia can take you. Long and boring. It doesn't. And there's only, it's like
wow.
I you know what I'm saying? It's just anyway. That's that.
That's good. I like the honesty. Sometimes we feel obligated to love things because, again, they're the characters that we loved as kids. And like you said, doesn't make it great.
I wanted to love it. I really did.
I get it.
I did. And so, Flash was a little problematic with Ezra stuff, just because of the, they're not treating everyone the same, like Jonathan Major and stuff like that. It's like, it's like either either you like say this can't be or it can be. It can't depend on how much money you've spent and all that kind of stuff. That was, but Keaton is my Batman too. I love Michael Keaton. He's the greatest. So,
and I think those scenes were great. Those scenes were so good.
I don't know anyone who didn't like the Flash movie. It just didn't blow up and that kind of thing. And so, and people either loved, I've seen plenty of people love the new Indiana Jones and plenty of people not love it. And so my wife liked it. She's like, don't be mad. I liked it.
What was the last one? Was Crystal Skull? Was that the last one?
That was like 15 years ago. And
that was $100 million opening weekend. And this one was 60.
They said this movie is going to hurt them more than The Flash hurt WB.
Wow. Wow.
But you never know. You never know. They tried. So it was nice. What are you going to do? All right. Well, Jay, thank you very much for hanging out with me.
Listen, just two guys talking about superhero movies. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all. All right. Thank you, my friend.
Good seeing you.
All right. How amazing was that conversation with Jay Towers? So fun, reminiscing all the OG Superman, Christopher Reeve movies, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Definitely tweeted us, commented us on the socials. I want to hear your feelings about any or all of the movies. If you're looking for the Classic Conversations 3-pack, Jack O'Halloran, episode 51, and the Christopher Reeve Legacy Reunion at the Motor City Comic Con, all those interviews are in episode 137. Check out Jay Towers' Caped Wonder Superman podcast, part of iHeart. If you're a Christopher Reeve fan, you're going to love that podcast. So much goodness. Well, with the interview over, it can only mean one thing. I know, it's over. Episode 280 has flown by. Special thanks to my guest, Jay Towers, and a huge thank you once again to all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.